So welcome everyone, I'm José Luis Hernández from the London School of Economics, and this is the parallel session on research methods. So if that's not what you were expecting to see, then now is the moment to change room or change your mind. We've got three very interesting presentations. We are already running late and we haven't started, so I'm going to have to be quite strict in terms of the 15 minutes that we've got allocated to the presentations, but also I would ask you to be as brief as possible when asking questions, and also to introduce yourself whenever you ask a question. The session is being recorded, and so if you don't want to appear in the recording, don't ask questions. And without any further ado, I think I'll just hand over to the first speaker, Dr. Sarah Carr from Middlesex University, who's going to be talking about how do we make safeguarding personal? And actually, it's not one, but three speakers.
In our principles of co-production, we're sort of doing a semi-team presentation. So we have my colleague Trish Hafford-Letchfield and Claudia Maygale, who are leading on two of the work streams. So thank you for having us here today. I just wanted to start by saying that in the programme, unfortunately, the co-authors are not as advertised. These are the co-authors, and I don't know where the National Centre for Social Research came on this project. We'd love to have a bigger team, but there you go. So these are the folks who are involved. Myself, Trish and Claudia, Alison Faulkner, who's leading on one of the work streams that's user-led, Dorothy Call, Christine Kieser, who are service user researchers, and we also now have Rachel Cohen, who's our research assistant. So that's us. Our study's called Keeping Control, and it really focuses on people with mental health problems as the user group, and it addresses multi-agency adult safeguarding, and particularly within the policy in the UK Care Act, making safeguarding personal. We're looking at policy implementation for people with mental health problems. The study is really like a vehicle to amplify service user voices and their experiences to inform policy implementation and practice development in the field of adult safeguarding for people with mental health problems, and to bring service users into discussion really with practitioners who are working on the same aspects of policy implementation. So in preparing our proposal, we looked at the research. We found there are significant gaps in the knowledge about service user experiences of adult safeguarding. We also found in the body of evidence on disability hate crime directed towards people with mental health problems that people with mental health problems were at higher risk of experiencing what is termed as disability hate crime, whether they understand it or categorise it as that. But the two discourses of hate crime and safeguarding didn't really fit together in any particular way, and we were concerned about exploring those aspects. So we started off by asking questions about mental health service user experiences and concepts of what we're calling targeted violence and hostility. So that's violence, abuse, harassment because of their mental health problems. And prevention, protection and help seeking. So what do they do to prevent something from happening or to protect themselves if it is happening, or to seek help after it's happened? So as I said, the study structure is really about facilitating a user-led conversation and amplifying the user voice and bringing it into conversation with practitioners and other stakeholders in adult social care, adult safeguarding and social care and mental health. So it's 16-month study, and we've got kind of 4 structured interconnected work streams using different data collection methods, led by people with different research, practice or lived experience backgrounds. So we've done the obligatory literature scoping review. The second work stream is some user-controlled service user interviews. That programme of work is being led by Alison Faulkner. We then are taking what we found from those interviews into practitioner-led stakeholder and practitioner focus groups to discuss those findings. That's being led by Trish, that piece of work. And then we're kind of trying to be innovative and using social media, which is Claudia's forte, to facilitate discussion on the key themes coming out of research. So this is happening in 2 stages. So what's come out of the interviews, and then what will be coming out of the focus groups to make the discussion broader. And that's happening through Mental Health Chat. And both my colleagues will be talking about that a bit later. So while Alison's on holiday at the moment, so I'm stepping in to talk about the work stream, which is about service user interviews, which is the user-led bit, which we're co-producing with practitioner colleagues, and this is the user-led bit. So we've got the team composition, team practitioner colleagues, service user colleagues, that's the co-production. We're using service user and survivor research values, methods and ethics. So it is explicitly service user and survivor led research study, and it's informed by that traditions, values and its epistemologies and theoretical bases. And it's very much applied research for social change. It's not just finding out for the sake of finding out. There's a reason we're doing this, and that is to influence change in the way people with mental health problems who are victims of violence and abuse are treated by adult safeguarding. And we have continually reflected on what the research is for, what we want it to do, the process of research, how we work co-productively and equalising our relationships, and where the control of the research lies. So it's shared control, but always focusing on the service user. It's also informed by a research tradition that came out of the disabled people's movement. That's emancipatory research, very conscious of the politics of knowledge production and research. So research for the emancipatory tradition is not knowledge production as an end in itself, but it's used for empowerment and change. So 3 main things about the emancipatory tradition are more equal social relationships of research production, the empowerment of service users, and making of broader social and political change. And one of the other things that's coming out of the study, while we're talking to frontline practitioners, is the issue of empowering frontline practitioners as well as part of that. So we're using some innovative data collection methods across the project. I'll start by speaking about the service user interviews, which are basically starting the conversation. We've carried them out and we're currently analysing them now as a team. We had to think about the fact that we would be asking people to talk about share difficult or traumatic experiences. We wanted them to tell us about what had affected, one incident that had affected them most, that they felt was related to their mental health status. So an incident of violence, harassment or abuse that was related to their mental health status. So we had to be very careful about the way we conducted our interviews, think through ethics very, very carefully, not only from the person's point of view who's a participant who's being interviewed, but because we have service user interviews who are conducting the interviewers who are conducting the interviews, we needed to think very carefully about the effect of hearing those things on service user interviewers, many of whom had similar experiences. So the service user research methodology meant particular ethical considerations. First of all, conceptualising harm and benefit in ethics for the research. And in the Ethics of Survivor Research, which was a report written by Alison Faulkner quite a while ago, I think 2004, one of the people in that who was a service user who'd been involved as a participant in a lot of research said the more control you have over research, the more chance it will be empowering, and you'll find you will have benefited. If you don't have any control, then the more chance you will find it harmful. So we took that very seriously, and we maximise the degree of control that research participants could have over their narrative. So we shared the transcript with them. We also made the decision that in conducting the interviews, we weren't just going to cut them off, because many people were embedding one incident in an entire narrative, often a lifetime narrative of many other incidents and narratives around their experiences in and out of mental health services and wards as well. Being very conscious of the fact that, again, they're a distressing topic. It's a topic which in itself implies we needed to think about safeguarding and participant distress. We compiled a help and resource list, and we were very, very careful to approach continuous consent seeking. So, support for service users, who were the researchers. It was kind of more than research support and supervision, technical, intellectual stuff. We had to think about how we were going to use some of the resources for practical support, maybe simple as you don't have to travel home on crowded transport. If you need time out to think about things, book a B&B, have a taxi, things like that. So practical support, and of course emotional support, debriefing, working together as a team to kind of process some of the things that were heard. So we recruited people. They were self-selecting through service user networks that we had access to. Okay, thank you. And they weren't mediated through services. So we took the interview findings to focus groups, which Trish will now talk about as the lead of that work.
I'll be very quick because we've only got 5 minutes. I just wanted to add that we even took care of the transcriber.
Yes, we
We
did.
offered support
Yes,
for listening to the stories, because as a experienced practitioner myself, I found the stories very harrowing. So we used focus groups to explore interim themes from the interviews with individuals interviewed about their experiences of targeted violence hostility with relevant people, and this was designed to facilitate a process of knowledge exchange between the two target groups to help shape the implications for practice. And also the focus groups served as a process of triangulation and consistency of themes from the scoping review and individual interviews. So we selected people for the focus groups on proxy agencies or roles that came up in the individual interviews, and we were particularly focused on asking people what did they think would promote help seeking, resilience, protection and prevention with people in these situations. So we did 5 focus groups, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just checking, with 46. But we did one particularly with qualified mental health practitioners, including social work, AMPs, mental health nurses, and then we did one with qualified social workers in both adults and children's services, one with national safeguarding leads. We managed to get on their agenda, it wasn't as long as we would like, and then we did 2 multidisciplinary groups with people who were named by the individual interviews. So it might be community groups, housing, disability, support, peer people running peer support, hospital and psychiatric people working in psychiatric wards. And we've still got one. We didn't get as many from housing as we'd like, and we've got one planned with the Metropolitan Police mental health team, which I'm really looking forward to. I'm meeting 5 of those in a focus group next month.
Hello, I'm going to be talking about the social media aspect of this research. So we use social media in order to triangulate the evidence that we got from the interviews as well as the focus groups. And in terms of the way we operationalize the use of social media, we did this through at Mental Health Chat. And at Mental Health Chat is a community of interest, a community of practice, and a knowledge network. So it takes place every Wednesday, and people are able to join the conversation through using the hashtag MHChat. And in terms of the chat's facilitated and chaired by professionals who have lived experience of mental health difficulties, as well as individuals that experience mental health difficulties. So in terms of operationalizing it, something that I was very mindful of was the ethics and the ethics involved when you're using social media. So the point of departure or their assumption wasn't simply that because we're using Twitter and it's an open platform that we're just going to take people's data and capture people's data and use it as part of the research. Something that we were very mindful of was the importance of getting informed consent. So just because time's very brief, I'm just going to kind of highlight some of the approaches that we took. So specifically, the aims and objectives, as well as informed consent, was posted on mental health chat, blog and website, and it was tweeted 2 weeks before we had the actual chat. It was tweeted again a week before we had the actual chat, and straight before the chat we tweeted participants that usually come to mental health chat to advise them that on the 7th of December we were going to specifically use the data for a research project. People were able to opt out of the research by either emailing, DM, or tweeting us that they didn't want to be part of the research. In terms of some of the actual figures, we had 140 participants on the day. We kept the chat open for a week, so that meant that we had more than 140 people that ended up participating. The day or the evening of the chat, it generated over 1,000 tweets, and in terms of Twitter impressions, we had 18 million Twitter impressions. In terms of the data, we're at the stage where we're analysing the data, and of course the themes that come out of this will feed back into the findings of the focus groups, as well as the interviews, and we have a second chat that is scheduled for later on. Thank you.
Fantastic. So yeah, watch out for that second chat. That should be happening relatively soon. So yes, thank you for coming here to listen to our research methods. As I say, we're at the moment we are deep in analysis, but we're going to run another mental health chat soon if you'd like to join in. So thank you.
We probably have time for, as I said before, that we will have now 5 to 10 minutes at the end in order to have a general chat. But if there is one pressing question, brief pressing question that you wanted to raise now, we could. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next. Okay, so Nick, next presentation is from actually my colleague at the University of Kent, Nick Smith, looking at engaging care home managers in research.
Afternoon, everyone. What I'd like to talk about today is some reflections on our experiences of engaging care home managers in research. And I'm talking as part of a team that's been doing this, so there's myself, and there's Anne-Marie and Madeline hiding in the corner, and Sinead and Grace, who are actually today out in care homes doing field work. And I'm drawing here really on two studies, both SSCR funded. The first one was Ascot Feedback Intervention Study, AFIS for short. And the second one is current. We're probably just over halfway through our fieldwork, called Measuring the Outcomes of Care Homes, or MOOCH. I'm not going to tell you too much about those studies, just to say that both of them use the Adult Social Care Outcomes Toolkit to look at quality of life in care homes, alongside other tools and qualitative methods. And they involve going into care homes, doing observations, talking to residents, talking to staff, talking to family members and friends. So you're in the care home doing a lot of work. We're not sending a survey in when I'm talking about this research. And if you're interested in AFIS, we have published a paper which is listed there. So first of all, think about why is it important to engage care home managers in research? Well, in a kind of very sort of self-centred way for the team. First, it's about recruitment. care home managers are quite often the gatekeepers to care homes taking part. Not always, and I'll talk about that when they're not the gatekeepers a bit later. And to be honest, research might not be their priority. In fact, it isn't their priority. They've got lots of other things to think about, day-to-day things. Their priority is caring for people that live there, supporting the people that live there. But there are also lots and lots of other things going on. So cuts to local authority budgets, national living wage, where they might be worrying about finances, a new inspection regime that's very important to them. There are negative images of care homes. Quite regularly there are TV shows, front pages of local papers saying about something that's happened in a care home. Very rarely does it say, and here's a care home where everything's great. So there's a kind of wariness about the outside world and what they might think. You can also add, and I've not put on this list, and I probably should have done, issues around staffing. So think about staff retention or unfilled places. So there's all these things going on within care homes that mean that research probably isn't a priority for a lot of care home managers. And so, for our studies to take place, we want to get in and recruit people. But it's not just about recruitment. And whenever I think about recruitment, I always go back to thinking about a study I heard about quite a few years ago, where the researchers were given the status of inspectors. So that they could pick a care home, turn up on the doorstep and say, I'm coming in to talk to people. I think every time I think, wouldn't that be lovely? Wouldn't that be lovely? But actually, the more I think about it, I think actually it misses out it has potential to miss out something really important about engaging care home managers, and that's impact. Because if you turn up and say, I'm doing this, I don't have to ask your permission, I don't have to explain why I'm doing it, I don't have to engage you, I can just do the research, then actually you're missing out on research impact. And I think, Sarah talked about earlier, a lot of us do research because we want to change the world. We don't just want to collect knowledge. Yes, we're interested, we want to know things, but we want the world to be different. We want to improve it. We want to make changes, and so that's impact is really important for that. And obviously, on a more sort of a career-based level, impact is becoming increasingly important to researchers' careers. So, what I'm going to probably draw on quite a lot today is both of the studies followed up the fieldwork research with interviews and conversations with care home managers, and sometimes with staff as well. We could to get them to reflect on their participation in the study. What was the experience like for them? Why did they take part? How did they find it? Could we do anything different? Those kind of things. The study we're working at the moment, Mooch, also included some structured questions. So I'm going to draw on those today. So this we asked care home managers what was their main motivation for taking part. And this is what they told us. What it doesn't do is tell us their secondary reasons, then the slightly less important reasons for taking part. So what comes across from this is that feedback on results and improving people's lives are the ones that they like to tell us are the really important things of why they take part in research. And then behind that is kind of things like CQC, so that the research you're doing is supported by CQC, that CQC now look favourably upon research. What this table does underplay slightly is the importance of support by the local authority. That came across as a secondary reason, but this is the main reason. And also, not a lot of people or care home managers told us that financial incentives, but there is also some social desirability bias there, that they might not feel comfortable saying, I did it for the money. But you never know. But that's what they're telling us. So I thought I'd start with thinking about the getting feedback, improving people's lives. And in many ways, this is really great that they're presenting this as something important, because if you think about it, we talked about impact, and this really feeds into impact. So our studies have given feedback on the work we've done in terms of written reports and feedback sessions with staff and managers. And some of the things that care managers have told us about, as I say, helpful to have independent people come in and speak to residents confidentially. Excellent way of gathering residents' views. But then the next one, talking more about what they do with the things we might, here's what we found, here's the things we uncovered. I have formulated an action plan to go forward and use the evidence to act on them. So it's a really good example of a manager reflecting on the research process and seeing what was really good for them about it, what they could do with it. And a slightly longer quote that talks about completely changing the whole set of the working day. I'll skip through a bit of it. They now have more time to spend with residents, that's the staff. Little things, painting nails, taking the onus off of task-orientated work. So that's an example of a manager taking the research and doing something, using it for change. I think in terms of feedback, it's also useful to think about how that might also interact with other reasons for taking part. So here you got, we worked with the bits that need improvement and showed CQC the report. Positive findings played a part towards an outstanding rate in the home received. So you can see how CQC, and I thought I'd go on to talk about CQC. So one of the things we've done, particularly on the second study, is involve CQC in the advisory group and planning, and they provided a letter of support so that when we're going to care homes, here's our letter of support, so we know that they've got support from CQC. Not only that, is 2015 CQC emphasises the importance of research and this is a small quote which is talking about what good or outstanding homes look like. And the key thing is they strive for excellence through consultation, research and reflective practice. So that tells homes that are looking to be good, looking to be outstanding, that actually engaging in research is an important thing to do. It's a good thing to do, it's a positive thing to do, will be viewed positively. It's not necessarily a distraction, it could be part of your core routine. And this is reflected in some of the things that care home managers said to us. So honestly, because of CQC, they actually commented on that in the report, and then someone reflecting that statement from CQC, research stands in good stead with CQC. So both, I think, the involvement of CQC in the project, but also that wider environment where they're promoting research is important, and seems to be a really good way of helping engage care home managers in research. The other thing we did, particularly on the second study, was work with local authorities. Important to care homes, just over 50% of beds in care homes are funded by local authorities. We had quite a mixed experience here. So in Mooch we've worked with 2 local authorities at various points, and one of the local authorities gave us a letter of support. It's on the advisory group. But what we found was very different responses to our working with local authorities in different areas. And we felt it was very much a reflection of the relationships those local authority teams had with the care homes. So in one area, it felt like our relationship with the local authority was actually negative, because people were very, very hostile to the local authority and to us. Whereas in the other local authority, it seemed to be a real bonus. People said, "Oh, I've heard about your work through commissioning team, through this team." So it seemed to be a very positive thing in some areas. So one area it was very, very negative, and actually it can be quite hard until you start working with the team and working to actually realise what the relationship is if it's not an area you're familiar with. And also the impact of austerity and cuts. So one of the teams we were working with in a local authority, just as we were getting the research off the ground, we spent a long time before this, they were partners in the funding. Suddenly the team had their budget cut and everyone lost their jobs, and that piece of work in that area fell apart because there was no longer any team to work with and any team to help engage care homes. So so a very mixed kind of picture there. The other thing I wanted to talk about was payment. So we've only used this in Mooch. So we provided a small payment to care homes and high street vouchers for participants. I put down ethical issues, but mainly because actually when we went to ethics, there was they didn't raise any ethical issues, and I suppose in the past a lot of us have felt that there would be issues around providing payment, and also there's now a willingness of a funder to fund payment. So there's been a kind of shift, I think, and I'm just going to quickly we asked those that have taken part so far, so this was a full team at that point, 14 care homes, what did you use the money for? And overwhelmingly it was for they told us resident experience, and those are kind of things like film projectors, days out, items for a sensory room, a day trip. The staff experience. I think one had a staff party, but the majority of it seemed to go towards resident experience. I'm going to mention a couple of other methods we tried to engage care home managers. And this one, so the first one is relations with provider organisations. So normally large chains where our first contact was with regional level. We've often, including regional managers in advisory groups, setting up the study, etc. Our experience has been quite negative of that. I'd be interested to know if anyone else had a really positive experience. So almost every chain we've worked, large chain we've worked with, when we've spoken at the sort of area manager level, has fallen through or gone very badly. So area managers moving on, not telling us you've no longer got any contact. Communication, so area managers saying this is brilliant, we'd love to take part, and care managers never having heard of it or not being convinced. So actually it was the individual home managers that you wanted to really speak to. Staff potentially, people moving on. A couple of other methods. So one of the things we targeted the research-ready homes, which we tended to find they were much more willing to participate in this, and I suppose it's because they are engaged in research and already see its value. Relationships with managers and associations of camps. We found, particularly in the second study, there were people who'd taken part in the first study who went and told people at meetings, oh, I took part in a previous study with this research team, and it was a really positive experience. And I think that it's all very well us telling care home managers, it's going to be great, it's not, you're going to love this, it's going to be so much fun taking part, and we won't cause any trouble. But another care home manager's been through it, and has much more weight. And also I want to mention conduct. This is particularly for probably the two researchers that aren't here today that are in the care home, who spend most of the time doing the actual face-to-face either research or setting up meetings and things like phoning people. So it was quite nice to get that back about them. So the researcher that contacted me by phone was enthusiastic. The two researchers that then visited me were passionate about the research. So I think that, if you're not passionate and engaged and excited about the research, how can you expect to pass that on to a care home manager who may not be thinking, it's not my priority. So just to summarise, so engaging care home managers in research can be tough. It's not their priority. They've got a lot of competing demands. We've used a range of methods across the two studies, some of which we found more successful than others, some of which we've found very unsuccessful. And there's a lot more methods than we've outlined today. I think going back to, it's not just about recruitment, it's impact is really important. And I think particularly when you look at what the care managers say they want to get out of the study, why they took part, it emphasises how important impact is. So building in a way of feeding back about engaging, not just collecting data and disappearing, but engaging once you've finished in conversations or sharing what you found, giving that ability to take what you may have found along with their experience and their interpretation of it, and change hopefully for the better where it's needed. So again, it's about working in partnership, not just going in and trying to take data away from for your own, to sit in an office analysing, to write a paper, but giving something back. That's it.
Thank you very much. Again, we're catching up, so we've got up to 3-4 minutes for questions if you want to. Yeah.
Thank you, Nick.
Could you say who you are?
Yeah, sorry, my name's Yvonne Burks from York. That very much echoes our experience of care home work. And I suppose one of the questions I have is, we do tend to have this kind of hierarchical approach to engaging with people, where we feel we have to start up here and negotiate our way through organisations to get to people. It seems like what you're saying is, doesn't work. Actually, we're better cutting that out and just going to the people who are actually going to be asked to do this.
Yeah, I mean, totally. When we've dealt with quite large chains, it's not been very successful. And even when there haven't been people moving on, we've spoken to a really enthusiastic regional manager, and they volunteered to home, so they have no choice. They might not really know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And actually the same can happen as some of we have care managers that perhaps run several units and it doesn't get past it. So it happens at different levels, but I've stuck at the kind of regional manager level to manage level for this. But yeah, it's crazy. Every time we've done it with it hasn't so far been successful talking at a higher level, and then it's always been more successful when we contacted or spoke directly to the person that actually has a home.
I'm Rachel Weiss from the University of Nottingham. I'm really fascinated by what both you and Yvonne just said there, because I had almost the opposite experience, but it was specifically about group home people with learning disabilities rather than old people. And we had quite a lot of instant success in working with organisations, both for-profit and not-for-profit. What we found very, very difficult to access were what we called independent, owner-managed homes, and we found them incredibly difficult to recruit. And so maybe it's different in the sector.
Quite possibly. I mean, we've recruited a range. The most successful channels have gone to the individual managers, but we have independent, and we haven't had a real difference yet between the two, I don't think. But yeah, that's our experience on 2 studies in 2 areas. So yeah, it's really interesting, a very different experience.
One more question over there.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Louise Schroeders from the University of Leeds. I'm also doing some care range research with managers, and I'm interested in your experience in recruiting a range of providers in terms of the CQC rating, or it seems to me that it's easier to recruit people who are well resourced already, and you might get a biased picture.
Absolutely, and we've been looking at addressing this. In Mooch and Little today, we're getting the goods, the outstanding is some requires improvement, but the inadequates, ones that are rated just not so well. We've recently been trying to address that, and actually our attempts to address it have found requires improvement rather than those who are rated as inadequate. So we've actually targeted those homes that are struggling and tried to put in an approach where the feedback we give is much more extensive.
So is this fitting in with the not just taking?
So we've got 40 homes, and the first way we do the feedback is through a written report. But those homes that perhaps need more help, we're offering to come and talk to staff, to really share what we found, to lead discussions, to try and come up with ways in which the things they're struggling with can be addressed, and the things that they're doing really well they can celebrate, and also work out how am I doing this really well, how can it be applied to perhaps if it's some people whose lives are being supported really well, I think there are how can you take the things you do really well and apply them across. So yeah,
Thank you very much. So I think we're going to have to move on. There's of course opportunity at the end to discuss some more of these issues. And now we're going to move on to Miriam Golden-Day, who's going to talk about the application of RCT methods in social care around an intervention on bathing adaptations. Great.
Thank you very much. So I'm Miriam, and Dr. Philip Whitehead is our principal investigator on the Bath Out trial. I am the research assistant, so Philip may help me in answering any of the questions that you have at the end. We are an IHR School for Social Care Research funded trial, and they have asked me just to mention that if you find anything I say today controversial, they don't accept responsibility.
Without controversial.
So to give you a quick overview, Bath Out is a randomised controlled trial feasibility study. As far as we're aware, it's the first randomised study into housing adaptations in the UK, and we use quite a novel waiting list control, which I'll discuss in a little bit more detail later on. Local authorities, as I'm sure some of you are aware, provide bathing adaptations as standard practice, but currently there is very little evidence actually supporting that in practice. And this is becoming ever more important now with the integration of health and social care and the introduction of the Better Care Fund. And adaptations are going to be required to have parity with other health interventions. So the study has a 3-part structure. First of all is the feasibility randomised control trial. And secondly, we have nested qualitative interviews, which we're conducting as we go along in the study process. The reason behind the interviews is twofold. We are wanting to explore the practices and processes behind the referrals when people are provided with adaptations at home, but also then to reflect on our process and the involvement of participants within the study itself. And finally, we are conducting a systematic review into the existing literature. This is currently registered on Prospero if any of you are interested and wanted to have a little look. and we currently have a first draft which we're hoping to submit for publication in the next few months. So at this stage I think it's important just to establish, for those of you that are not familiar with the term, a bathing adaptation in our study translates to something called a level access shower, or you may be more familiar with the term wet room. There's an example up on the screen now. It's essentially where the existing bath or shower is removed, the flooring is changed, a drain is put in, the shower is mounted on the wall. It's fully accessible, so you can use either a stationary or a wheeled showering chair. As well as our primary questions, we do have secondary questions around the waiting times that people have. Often to have these adaptations put in around the country, these waiting times can extend into the years. So we are interested to see about whether the wait to have this type of adaptation has an effect on the long-term outcomes for citizens, and then also the cost of that. With obviously cutbacks across the nation, it's ever more important to kind of evidence cost effectiveness, and so we're hoping to try and capture that data as well. So to break down our study methodology, which is obviously the primary reason that we're here today, we recruit all of our citizens through referrals from the Nottingham City Council Adaptations and Renewals Agency, who are the responsible body for providing all types of housing adaptations within Nottingham City. The manager of this team is actually a co-applicant on our study and is quite heavily involved with the ongoing operations, which certainly we feel has meant that we've had such a good success, and we'll talk a little bit about more about that later on. So our criteria for inclusion, we are interested in the adult population over the age of 65. And we have a specific interest in, obviously, a bathing disability, looking into a requirement for bathing adaptations. So we are limiting the referrals, so it's just for a level access shower only. We're not including referrals for stair lifts or ramps or anything else like that. And then also priority B status, which is something that the local authority Nottingham use. Priority A is reserved for people that have a terminal illness, so they're dealt with separately. This is quite important to our rationale, this reference here, if anybody wanted to have a look up. It's work that Jill has done, and they have highlighted that the importance of the onset of a bathing adaptation in terms of it being a signpost for the onset of other further physical disability in this age group, which is why we have very specific population interest in this study. Similarly, we were also really interested in involving the carers in the research, and we feel they have a very important perspective. So we have quite a loose term for carer. It's including anybody, friend or family, neighbour, that is just providing assistance in activities of daily living. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're using waiting list control. So that's the natural waiting list. It's not artificial that we've put in. Currently, the waiting list at the City Council is 4 months, and our intervention removes citizens off that waiting list, and they are then assigned their project officer straight away so that the work can begin for the process of having the shower put in place. Traditionally, this type of study has obviously been quite difficult within the social care setting, randomised controlled trials, where you have one group of citizens allocated an intervention, another group of citizens given an alternative, and presumably both have been assessed as needing that intervention. So by using the natural waiting list, both groups are still allocated and have the same result. It's just the timescales that are going to be different. So all of our citizens have 3, 6 and 9 month follow-ups. We are due to complete our 9 month follow-ups at the end of November. And then, as I mentioned, we're conducting our interviews ongoing as we collect our outcome data. So this is a flowchart just giving you an idea about the different avenues that somebody in the intervention group may experience and somebody in the control group. So after their eligibility is confirmed, we are approaching them obviously for consent and then to conduct baseline assessment, following which they're randomised into either intervention or control. Intervention being without the waiting list. So for somebody in the intervention group, at that first 3 month follow-up assessment, we've found that the majority have actually had their shower put in place, and so have been able to start using the facility. And those in the control, with the waiting list being 4 months, they're still sat on the waiting list, nothing has changed. And that is our primary outcome measure at 3 months to determine between two groups. Then at 6 months, any of those stragglers left have been mopped up, and so everybody in the intervention group will have had their shower allocated to them. And we're starting to see then some in the control group having those showers put in place. And then finally, at our 9 month, both groups will have had the shower fitted and hopefully have been using for at least a few months. So, primary reason for doing the follow-up assessments is to collect outcome data. So our users, we're using 6 different outcome measures, and the carer we have 4. For the user, we're really interested in health status and quality of life, and we think this is where we're going to see the biggest movement with this intervention. So we're using the SF36 and the EQ5D. We also have quite a keen interest in the social care related quality of life, so some of you will recognise the Ascot scale. And then also performance in different activities of daily living using the Bartel scale. We do feel that this intervention specifically has the potential for a high impact in the number of falls that people are experiencing at home. So we're collecting data around that, the consequences of any falls, whether that requires medical attention, hospital admission, and then the citizens' perceived fear of falling using the falls efficacy scale. And then we're also using a bespoke pro forma to collect health economic resource use, and that's a pro forma that a professor in our division has put together for us. In addition to this, for the carer questionnaire, we are asking the carer strain index to try and gather information around the burden and the extra strain on a carer and how that might be affected by the intervention. So this is the best slide. This is our favourite slide. If I can draw your attention to the red line. So you'll see that we set a target of between 40 and 60 participants to be recruited. We've actually achieved our maximum of 60 participants 2 months ahead of schedule, so we've closed recruitment 2 months early, which has allowed us then to obviously start gathering the further onset of the 6 and the 9 month data much quicker. And to just give you a breakdown of the figures, one of the reasons that we've had such a quick recruitment is because we had a very high uptake. So there were 72 citizens that were identified as being eligible to take part. Of those 72, 3, the adaptation team were unable to contact them. Of those that they contacted, 6 didn't consent to have their information passed on to the research team at the university. There was another 1 that then we were unable to contact, and 2 that we were unable to identify appropriate consultees for. So we have ethical approval to include citizens that do not have capacity to consent, as long as we're able to identify an appropriate consultee. We actually have 7 citizens in our study who are able to participate and obviously then have the potential gain of being involved in the study. And they are very actively involved in answering the outcome questions, but it was just felt that they didn't have the full capacity to consent at baseline. So then I went out to visit 60 participants, and of those 60, all 60 actually agreed to take part in the study, which I think is quite unprecedented. Certainly in our division, it's never been heard of. So we were really, really pleased with that. And then we had a further 23 carers that agreed to consent to part as well. So these figures will be different to the ones in the little handouts. These are live figures, so these were updated yesterday. So far, of the 3 month follow-ups, we have seen 35 participants, and that's an 89% completed rate. We've had 2 withdraw and 3 then lost a follow-up. And we've just started doing our 6 month follow-up, so we've seen 8 participants so far. Unfortunately, we did lose a gentleman between the 3 and the 6 month follow-ups, but we're still retaining our figures quite well. We were worried with such a high uptake at the beginning that we might have a very quick dropout rate, but actually we've managed to maintain that so far. So just to summarise, we feel that the study as a pilot is going very well, so we've been considering some of the influencing factors behind this. We feel it's quite attractive to citizens to take part in the study. Sometimes you do need to give them an incentive, and it's a 50-50 chance of much quicker adaptations, and a lot of the people that I've been to see have been sat on waiting lists for one thing or another to get to this stage, so the option of coming off that waiting list and actually getting something done is really attractive to them. The intervention in itself isn't experimental, so people know what's going to happen and there's no risk of non-allocation as well. The assessments are always straightforward. Something that we feel quite strongly about is that it should be done by a researcher and not done by a postal survey or anything like that. Most of the outcome measures are conducted by myself. I go to people's homes whenever's convenient, take the time to sit with them and go through everything. And also the population group that we're looking at, everybody that's involved in the study has been retired so far, so perhaps they have a little bit more time to commit, and a lot of the citizens are living on their own and are often quite happy for me to come round and have a chat and a cup of tea. And I mentioned earlier that Tony, the manager at the City Council, is a co-applicant on the study, and it's interesting with you talking about kind of involving care managers in the home setting, that having somebody, an industry partner, how much of an impact that has had on the success of the study, and certainly the operational side of things, making sure everything's running smoothly, and that's been really important. So because of the successes so far, we are looking towards the next stage. We felt in a position to respond to a commission call, so we have an application put together for BAFAT 2 at the moment, which we are hoping to then will be a power definitive outcome and using multiple sites. Assuming a successful outcome from BAFAT 2, we feel that that can legitimise the methodology of using a waiting list control and randomised control trials in the social care setting. So we have 2 publications that should be coming up for publication as long as they're accepted. So keep your eyes peeled. The systematic review should be out by the end of the year, and then we'll be doing our analysis and write-up at the end of this year and the early 2018. So we'll be submitting that for open access publication in the spring of next year. So keep your eyes peeled. We do have grand plans. So BAFAT 3 is potentially on the horizon. I have my eye on the Honolulu site. So thank you very much for listening. I do welcome any questions.
So again, a few minutes to specifically on this paper.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I have a couple of
Could you please just say who you are?
Oh, sorry. Yes. My name is Vasha Tolska. I'm from the University of Warren. I was very interested in the selection of the comparison group. One of my questions as I was listening to this, why a waitlist control, I realized that while you were speaking. And so my question now is, if there was a full trial, is the question about the effectiveness of bathing adaptation, or is it about the timing of the adaptation with regards to maximum effectiveness?
Well, we would have hopefully 2 research questions in regard to that. Our primary focus is certainly in terms of wanting to establish the use of bathing adaptations and evidencing their use, though the waiting list and the time that they are then obviously provided to citizens is a secondary question for us, but potentially one that can pique a little bit more interest maybe, because of obviously most services now do have waiting lists. And so it does carry those 2 questions that sit together.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
Question over there.
Alan Brennan, I'm a Professor of Health Economics and Modelling in the University of Sheffield. So I finally felt at home looking at your outcome measures. So my question was about, this kind of carries on really, in BAFAT 2, if it were me, I would be writing an extra bit, which would be to try to estimate the long-term return on investment from the BAFAT, because there is a hint in your abstract that by having it, you reduce both risk of going into institutional social care, or sorry, my language is completely wrong, home room, and I like doctors. So you could model the risk of going in, and also it's almost hypothesised in their abstracts that in a health language it's disease modifying. In other words, people's disability progression is slowed down as a consequence of this.
Yes.
And that all needs some long-term modelling of the disability progression and probabilities of incurring those further long-term costs. I'd always write 3 bits in my health economic plan, right? The resource use bit, the quality of life bit, which you've got, and then this long-term modelling.
Absolutely, and that is something that's going to be quite interesting when we look at dissemination of the research as well, because that's what everybody's interested in. How much is this going to cost, and can we reduce costs otherwise? So preventative measures, the intervention does have a massive preventative element that we feel. It's about evidencing that. So the health economics is really important to us. And I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add, Philip.
No, only that I'm sort of reassured from both the questions, because I've just been writing that out to you. There's 3 questions to it. One is, what is the effect of adaptations versus no adaptations, and that's that primary follow-up. Then what is the impact of waiting times on outcomes, and that's our longer follow-up. And then third, what is the cost effectiveness, and that is looking at the long-term effect on resource use and quality of life. So all 3 of those components are there in that too.
Question over there.
Hi, I'm Catherine Poltron from the Health and Care Research Wales. Are you including a question about how the adaptation impacts on the need for domiciliary care?
So we collect that data, we ask all the citizens at baseline and then follow up whether they're having any paid carers coming in to assist with their daily activities, and then also specifically around bathing. So we are asking that question. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's just that sometimes...
There's so much more that we could go into detail in everything. 15 minutes, you have to be brief.
We spend a lot on adaptations and actually still need the same level of care, so it hasn't actually promoted.
Yes, potentially. Yes, absolutely. Though there is a lot of, when I've been to do my baseline assessments, a lot of the citizens who have perhaps are on the better end of the scale in terms of ability to do most of the daily activities, and it is just bathing that specifically they struggle with, that they are hopeful that with the adaptation that they may be able to reduce care packages, or at least be a little bit more independent in that respect. We don't have any data if that's the case, but certainly from speaking to citizens, that's something that they would like.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? There's one over there. Can you
Sorry.
Catherine Stevenson, Arthritis Research UK. Did you capture what had caused the disability, or was it just directly referred from the council?
We do. So we don't stratify, and we don't obviously eliminate on any of the reason for the bathing disability. So it's the bathing disability is assessed by an OT when they go out to see them, but then we do capture that data when I do my baseline assessments.
Hello. Yvonne Burks from the University of York. I'm just wondering, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's really nice to go out and collect the data one-to-one. But if you're scaling this up, how big is this going to get, and how resource intensive is that going to be as a mechanism for data collection?
Yeah, this has been a little bit of a headache for us, hasn't it, with the BAFAT2 application. So we do feel it is very important to have that face-to-face contact, certainly with the population group that we're dealing with. It does have a cost impact, though I would argue that that's outweighed by the benefit. And I feel that if you were to do this type of research in any other way, the comeback from the citizens, I think, would be much, much less. Our figures are obviously very high at the moment, and I think that you would lose the benefit of the research purely from the fact that you would have very few responses.
You've sort of summarised the conversation I've been having with clinical trials for the last 2 to 3 months, but I don't think we can really negotiate on that with the population. And one of the things that the successful recruitment rate has done is been able to do it in fewer sites, because sites that have got the throughput of delivering the adaptations, we're confident that the participants will want to study, so we can sort of offset the cost that way. It is a cost.
Yes, PSS are you at the LSE? But I'm also a carer. So I'm looking at it from a carer point of view, and I can see the significant benefits of wet rooms for many individuals. My husband has advanced Alzheimer's. He's too far on now, but it would be a benefit. But I'm thinking about knowing the pressures on local authority funding or healthcare funding with reablement and adaptations. Just thinking, even, do you pick up anything? I might have missed it. Anything about, yes, the benefit, but because of the demand, increasing demand, and the fact that many adaptations which you didn't cover, like seats and craft, this sort of thing, can really be beneficial for quite a long period, I experience. So sort of comparison, you haven't picked that up at all, have you, at the moment?
No.
You know, the value for money, really, I'm thinking, because this is super, but not many people are going to get it in relation to the whole population of people in need.
Yes, which is why our health economics is so crucial, really, because to put in a shower like this is about £4,500. So if you think about everything else that you could do with that money, so
that would be interesting to me.
Yes, which is why the long-term benefit and outcome is really important, and we can't capture that in a pilot study. You know, we're finished by this time next year, so I do think there's a lot of potential around that. This is what we're focusing on at the moment. This is what we've chosen as our niche, but I do think that there's lots of potential for that to expand.
Any more questions? Also, I must say, on the other two papers, so if we open it up to the three papers overall, I'll come back to you in a second. Just give a chance over there. Yes? Okay, if you...
Yes. This is for Mick Smith. This is about your research on care home managers.
Can you please introduce yourself? Sorry.
Josephine Buckle from Department of Health. My question is, did your research touch on administrative issues? This is in terms of form filling for care managers, because they haven't got a streamlined or accessible forms within the care homes.
It didn't, I think the only way it might have done a little bit is where care home managers might have talked about pressure on their time generally. So it didn't look at it directly, no. Its focus was very much on the quality of life of the residents. But obviously we spoke to care home managers about their experience of taking part in research and how it was for them and why they took part. Those kind of things. So no, not directly on that, I'm afraid.
Just behind you, Robin.
Robin Dart from the University of Kent. On the Bath study, can you say what proportion of people who are referred to the Bath service actually are able to have the adaptations? Because you mentioned you weren't including, say, other adaptations like stair lifts and things like that. Well, if somebody has got an upstairs bathroom and is converted, if they can't get to it, it's not going to be very useful. And some houses are just probably not going to be adaptable because of the layout. And I just wondered what the problem of inability to provide the service was.
Well, from the service point of view, there's no issue with people getting a level access shower and the stair lifts. We just don't include them in our study. By far the most frequent adaptation in this age group is level access shower only. You know, that's the sort of bread and butter, and that's how you picked it and stuck to that. Obviously, the more you include, the more complex the packages become, the more difficult it is to allocate a time scale to it. So that's why we focus. But it is over, I think it's over 50% of the adaptations for people aged over 65 are just level access shower only. So it's by far the biggest throughput.
Any more questions? Yes.
I have a question for the care home managers study. I liked your slide about the feedback where the manager had said because of the research we changed what we did.
Yeah.
And I think that's often underplayed, and I just would encourage you to submit that as a case study to the Enrich website. Because at the moment, the website tends to focus more on helping researchers, but it doesn't have as much resources explaining to care managers how it's been beneficial in participation. So please do put that case study up for them.
Actually, I forgot there was another question here.
Well, I was going to ask, and I'm sure you've thought of it already because you've thought of everything that I thought of. And it's related to what was said over there somewhere about the natural question is about subgroups and targeting those at the most need. So are you looking at that in Bathout 2, and is there a natural definition of subgroups that you could look at in advance or stratify by? I'd be starting to do it in terms of ASCOT, but I don't know what I'm talking about.
We're not thinking about subgroups within Bathout 2. I suppose I see Bathout, the Bathout population as a subgroup of the adaptation population. So, no, we haven't thought about subgroups.
If someone like NICE or whoever would come back and say the country hasn't got enough money to do it all, which would be the best.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Pete Belden, and I'm a Care Act trainer. My question is to Claudia. It's about the social media facilitating discussion. I do a lot of work with BASWA about trying to find out how social workers are applying the Care Act, and I was wondering whether that method might be useful. When you used it with people who were cert users and lived experience, a lot of responses. So was it a challenge to make sense of the data? And are there other examples of this particular method of research?
So in terms of kind of the knowledge network mental health challenge, I think that it wasn't difficult to make sense of the data. Although you're working with very limited data sets, 140 characters per tweet, I think in terms of the people that contribute to the network, they're quite sophisticated kind of social media users and quite sophisticated Twitter users. So I think in terms of the way they put their views across and points across, they often link to different websites or link to their blogs. And it's not just people with lived experience, it's also professionals. So I think what's quite unique about using an open platform like that is you're able to capture a number of different views, and you're able to pull people together that normally wouldn't kind of sit in a room and have that conversation. And I think the social media also provides kind of a more leveling playing field where everyone's voice is kind of heard and important. And in terms of using social media as a research tool, so I've used it before. I've also used it with social workers as well as social students. So I actually embedded social media within an MSc program in order to enhance digital literacy skills, and then kind of used it in many different ways to kind of capture data to complement different pieces of work I was doing. I think kind of the trickiest part with this particular research project was the ethics and how to ensure that kind of people are informed that we're using this kind of particular chat as a part of the research. So we had to be very careful about that. And in terms of the way it was designed, the design very much thought about informed consent and how we could build it into the way that operationalized it. So for example, the way we advertised it always with the informed consent attached. We tweeted people specifically, and it was myself and a number of other colleagues, because when you use social media, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of work because you do have a large volume of data to get through. But I think what was helpful was mental health chat is quite an established network, so it often trends on Twitter. So we know that if we use it, we will get good data. I think often people use social media, and the problem that they have is usually more lack of engagement, especially if kind of the brand isn't established. So I hope that answers the question.
We've run out of time, unfortunately, so before we rush for the food, if we could just thank very much all the speakers.